Thank you, Mr. Bondevik. Our next speaker is originally from Sri Lanka, but he now lives in Washington, D.C. He is the coordinator for the youth program for the organization called Search for Common Ground. And what that ground is and what the organization does, you'll hear about right now. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Saji Prelis.
Good morning. It is still good morning. Good morning. No. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Chris said, my name is Saji Prelis. I am from Sri Lanka. I grew up in Sri Lanka. When I was growing up as a young person, I can still consider myself young, what shaped my life was the lived experience of people I was interacting with. What shaped my life was the good side of, actually the ugly side of human nature unfolding in front of me. And at the same time, the really good side of human nature also unfolding in front of me. For the folks who are familiar with Sri Lanka, you will know what I mean by this. Seeing that ugly side and good side really confused me. Why are people able to do good and also evil? And it really helped shape what I wanted to study. And I'm still trying to figure out the answers to this. But that journey has led me to a place called Search for Common Ground. The organization's name is Search for Common Ground. It's the largest peace-building conflict transformation organization in the world. And a lot of the work we do is working with youth groups, youth organizations, youth movements in about 31 countries right now. And I have the distinct privilege of supporting our country programs in about 30 countries. We grapple with the challenge of how do we empower young people, but how do you take it to scale? A country that has millions of young people, how do millions of young people understand the collective struggles? So we use media as a mobilizing tool, a vehicle, so that the voices of the young people can be heard across the country on radio and television. Because of this conference here, I wanted to actually share one quick example. Search is also in the process of working with the young people from billionaire families and multi-millionaire families, the young people from them, trying to organize them, get them motivated around how their young identity can help shape today's generation as well as the next generation, we call them. So how can young wealth holders can transform societies also? So we are not only dependent on governments, we are not only dependent on development actors, but the young generation who are wealth holders also should be part of that process. Chris talked earlier about, as he was introducing, the struggles in Myanmar and the role young people played in it. And you all know about the Arab Spring, the role young people played in the Arab Spring. But I don't know how many of you actually know the struggles and the African uprisings that have happened. Show of hands, have any of you known the same thing that happened in African countries too? So Sudan, Nigeria, Angola, Senegal are some of the countries where the similar struggles happen, like it happened in Myanmar, like it happened in Egypt, and Tunisia, and Libya. In African countries also, young people were struggling to collectively voice their concerns, trying to fight the economic injustices and the political repression they have been going through, and have made a lot of progress in that. But we've seen the results of that. The establishment has come back into power in some places and said, thank you very much, now we'll take over and we'll know how to govern you. Young people have been typecast as troublemakers or unprofessional. They don't know how to govern. Adults know how to govern. But Mr. Bondevik talked about a digitally connected global community. Information is immediate. What I have noticed around the world is when you look at how young people are organizing themselves, they organize horizontally. But when I compare that with several adult-oriented focused organizations, they govern vertically. There's a hierarchical structure. But young people are not organizing that way. Young people around the world generally are organizing very horizontally. Last month, when we organized a youth consultation in the Middle East and North Africa with youth coming from about 6 different countries, youth leaders in the movement, none of them wanted to be representing the leadership of that country. When I said, why don't you as a group figure out a spokesperson? They said, no, we cannot. We all have different voices. We need to all be represented. One person cannot represent all of us. We need to give space for all of them to speak. Pretty inspirational. But the Royal Highness talked about this morning about the populations, the global demographics in the world right now. But one thing, stark difference we are seeing in this is that majority of these young people are living in developing countries, countries that are struggling to rise economically, socially, and culturally. What we don't always see clearly is that young people in these countries are highly organized. We heard that in the earlier panel from Sierra Leone too. Young people are already active and involved, and they're articulating their voices in very creative ways. But the language they're using, some adults don't hear and don't understand. Just to give you another example, with Search for Common Ground's work in Liberia, just to give an example of how organized they are. We were involved with a country like Sierra Leone has gone through a tremendous amount of conflict. Young people in the thick of it, as troublemakers, but also as peacemakers in the country. 12 years later, $20+ billion has been spent by the international community in Liberia. What we were looking at is take a step back from that and see what has been the cumulative impact of foreign assistance for young people in countries like Liberia that are transitioning out. What was unique about this was a couple of things. One, it was completely youth-led. It was young people from American University in Washington, D.C., partnering with 6 only, about 30 youth leaders from throughout Liberia, coming together, trying to understand what has been the cumulative impact of foreign assistance. So it's not only the facts about how much money that was spent for what purposes that mattered for us. We were also interested in understanding how they were perceived by recipient communities. A 240-page report was done. I was very impressed because this is the type of report that a World Bank would produce. This was produced by young people below the age of 28. About 30 of them were involved in this project. The cost over 9 months was $95,000 US. That happened last year. Last month, when I called the Minister for Youth, I asked him, what has been the impact? You know, is it collecting dust on some rack in the ministry, or what has happened? What he was saying was, because of the unique partnerships that we organized this effort with. So the partnership was university students here and university students in Liberia, partnering with the Ministry of Youth, partnering with the Ministry of Statistics, but making sure that it was youth-led, adult-supported, but technically advised to produce a 240-page report that generated the presidents, cabinet members involved with youth issues, the Ministry of Youth and Ministry of Education to really understand what the pulse of the nation was. But what I was surprised about was one other thing that came out. What young people had 7 priorities. One of them was infrastructure. 12 years later, the country still has no proper road system or electricity grid. And they were talking about the role young people can play specifically in improving and maintaining the roadways in several other counties. That happened 9 months ago. That happened in November when we produced the report. Last month, when I talked to the minister, he said, after $90,000 has been spent, 5,000 jobs have been created in the country. For a conference like this, that's a pretty good rate of return. For $80,000, $95,000 contribution and 5,000 jobs being created also in a short period of time. And it was all done led by young people itself. My brother from Sierra Leone were talking about this, empowering young people. It's a huge crisis. Unemployment, how do you address them? It's creating that enabling environment for young people to really shine and supporting that. This has empowered Search for Common Ground to work now with The Economist to develop a youth engagement index. So for countries that are large youth populations, the dominant paradigm is the youth bulge theory, which talks about countries that have large youth populations tend to be more fragile, more unstable. That also means these young people are the troublemakers. What we are trying to do is flip that upside down and say countries that have large youth populations can be more economically sound, can be more prosperous. So with The Economist, we're actually trying to develop a youth engagement index for about 40 countries. And we're looking for partners to do this because this is a collaborative effort. It's not doing an index that matters. It's the process of developing an index, working with governments in these countries, working in partnership, like Partnership for Change model, with collaborators to support this and enable young people to be the driving force in this process also. If I take a step back now, I see the youth movements of today similar to the women's movements of 2000 and before. What happened in 2000 was the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, for those who are familiar with, a Security Council resolution that proposed the support of women to be part of peace-building processes. One thing we've learned from that over the years, it has supported women all around the world to have a voice, to be at the table. What we've not yet fully recognized is that by supporting women, we cannot support women fully if we do not find male champions to be with them, helping them shape the table itself. So if we take that lesson and apply to the youth movement of today, one of the lessons is the need to be working at an intergenerational level. Working with young men, young women, and men and women of all ages together, working together to build a country up, to build a country back better. If we only focus on empowering youth, empowering male youth and female youth only, at the cost of empowering other generations, then we'll miss the mark. Because for 10 years later, we'll come back and say, oh, we missed another generation. I think it's the senior citizens then, maybe. That's not right. We can learn these lessons from the past and apply it today to make sure we don't repeat the same mistakes later. Empowering young people is about dignity, dignity for not just young people. It's about not only teaching young people, it's about learning together, across different generations, learning together how to build this country back up in these developing places. And the global community right now, with young people involved in the middle of this, it's the largest creative body this world has ever seen. The largest, most talented group of people around the world. Imagine if we work at an intergenerational level, working in partnership with the adults, working with partnership with the governments, and young people together, young men and young women together, youth movements, youth organizations, and youth clubs. Imagine working together to build one country in these developing countries. The potential it has for economic prosperity is tremendous. If we neglect to do that today, we may regret it next year. So it's our collective challenge. Use this Partnership for Change model to work collaboratively across different dividing lines, across different ages, to work together, to enable young people and adults to live in a very prosperous, safe, economically strong country and in a global community. Thank you.